Welcome to Restoria. I'm Edward, and this is your quiet place for gentle bedtime stories. Get comfortable, take a breath, and let the story ease you into sleep. The Cat Café on Marlow Street. The rain had begun somewhere outside the city, and by the time Theo's train slowed into the small station at Marlow, it had settled into the kind of steady, patient rain that asks nothing of anyone. He stepped down onto the platform with his small leather bag in one hand and his coat collar turned up against the soft drift of it, and stood for a moment under the iron awning, watching the drops pock the puddles between the rails. He had not meant to stop here. The connection to the next train was over an hour away, and the timetable in the station window had said that the next service was delayed by another 40 minutes besides. There was no particular hurry waiting for him at the other end of the journey. A friend's house, a spare room, a weekend in the countryside that he had been promising to take for over a year. He had time. The station master, an older woman with a kind face and a knitted shawl over her shoulders, had pointed him gently toward the small village beyond the platform when he had asked where one might wait out the rain. Marlow Street was just up the lane, she said. There was a cafe there with a warm fire and good tea. A nice place to sit a while. He had thanked her. She had wished him well. He walked up the lane slowly, taking in the things one only takes in when there is no reason to rush. A garden wall hung with trailing ivy, a wooden gate painted a faded green, a stone trough by a doorway in which a single white pebble sat alone at the bottom of a small pool of rainwater. The cobbles underfoot were uneven and shining wet. The smell of the village was the smell of damp earth and wood smoke and the faint, comforting scent of bread from somewhere further up the road. He passed a low cottage with a window box of late lavender, the purple gone soft and almost gray in the rain. A small black and white dog sat under the eave of a doorway watching him with calm interest, ears slightly cocked, tail giving a single small thump against the doorstep as he passed, and Theo nodded at it the way one nods at any creature taking shelter from the rain alongside oneself. He passed an old man in a long coat carrying a paper bag of something warm under one arm, the smell of pastry trailing behind him for a moment after he had gone by. He passed a small green door set into a stone wall, ajar, with the soft murmur of a kettle and a radio coming faintly from somewhere within. He found Marlow Street easily. It was a narrow curve of small shops and old houses, the kind of street that had not changed much in a long while. A shoemaker's window, a small bookshop with its lights on, a grocery with crates of apples and turnips set out under a striped awning, the rain dripping steadily off the awning's edge into a metal pail below. Tap, tap, tap. The cafe was at the far end. A pale yellow door, slightly faded, with a small hand-painted sign above it that read, in soft brown lettering, "The Cat Café." The window beside the door was steamed at the edges, and through the cleared center of it, Theo could see the warm yellow glow of lamps and the soft movement of bodies inside, and one slow, sleepy stretch of an orange tail curling along the inside of the windowsill. He pushed the door open. A small bell rang above his head, soft and brassy, the kind of bell that did not so much announce a visitor as gently mention them to the room. The smell that met him was warm and complex and immediately good. Coffee, cinnamon, the faint, clean scent of cedar shavings, the drier, comforting smell of a room that had been kept warm for a long time. He stood for a moment in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust. The cafe was small, 6 tables perhaps, a long wooden counter at the back, behind which a copper kettle sat on a low blue flame, breathing soft steam. Bookshelves built into the walls, stacked with old hardbacks, their spines softened with use. A small fire burning in a tiled hearth at the back of the room. The logs settled low and red, throwing a faint, warm light across the wooden floor. A round window above the hearth that looked out into a small back garden where the rain was drawing soft, pale curtains across the leaves of a fig tree. The walls were painted a soft, warm cream, paler near the ceiling, deeper near the wainscot, the kind of color that absorbed lamplight and gave it back as something gentler. A long string of small dried flowers ran along the top of the bookshelves on the back wall, faded now to soft pinks and creams and pale lavender, the kind of dried flowers a child might have helped to hang there one summer afternoon long ago. A wooden grandfather clock stood in one corner, its pendulum moving with patient slowness, ticking out a rhythm so steady it had become part of the room rather than a sound within it. The kind of ticking one stopped hearing after a few minutes and then began to feel instead somewhere in the chest. And cats, not many. Not in the way Theo had perhaps half expected, with the small theatrical chaos of a place built around the idea. Just 3 or 4, scattered through the room, each occupied with their own quiet business. An orange cat asleep on the cushion of a window seat, paws folded under chin. A gray tabby curled tight in a wicker basket on top of one of the bookshelves, the basket lined with a soft folded blanket. A small black cat, sitting upright on the wooden counter beside the till, watching the room with the calm attention of something that had been here longer than anyone. A fourth, somewhere only suggested by the soft thud of a tail against a chair leg under one of the tables. A woman came through from the back room as the door closed behind him. She was older, her hair tied back in a soft gray twist, an apron the color of oatmeal tied at her waist. She did not say anything, only smiled at him in the way of someone used to people arriving from the rain, and gestured with one open hand toward the empty tables, as if to say, "Take whichever one you like." He chose the one by the window. He set his bag down on the wooden floor beside his chair and slid out of his damp coat, hanging it over the back of the seat opposite him. The chair was an old wooden one with a soft red cushion that had been used into the shape of generations of people sitting. He sat down slowly. The chair gave a small creak of greeting. The window beside him was lightly fogged at the edges, and through the clearer middle he could see the rain falling softly onto the cobbles outside, and a small puddle filling slowly in a dip of the stone. The orange cat on the next window seat opened one eye, considered him without any particular concern, and closed it again. The black cat on the counter watched him for a long, even moment, and then slowly, with great dignity, looked away toward the fire. The woman came over with a small wooden menu in her hand. She set it gently on the table in front of him and stood for a moment, her hands folded in front of her apron. "A pot of something warm," she said. "Whatever you like." He glanced at the menu. Tea, coffee, a small list of soft cakes, a bowl of soup with bread on the side. He looked back up. "The cinnamon tea," he said. "And the bread and soup, perhaps, if there is enough." "There is always enough," she said. She took the menu away. He let his shoulders settle back against the cushion of the chair. The rain continued its soft drumming against the window. A log shifted in the fire with a small dry crack, and a small puff of sparks rose up the chimney and were gone. The orange cat on the window seat sighed deeply, the way only a sleeping cat can sigh, and turned slightly so that its belly was warmer to the window. He sat and looked at the room. There were two other people in the cafe besides himself. An old man at a corner table reading a newspaper, his glasses low on his nose, a half-empty cup of coffee at his elbow. A young woman at the long table by the bookshelves, writing slowly in a notebook, pausing now and then to look up at the ceiling, then back down to the page. Neither of them looked up when Theo came in. Neither of them looked up now. The room had the easy quiet of a place where people did not need to perform their being there. The fire breathed. The kettle on the counter hissed gently. The gray tabby in its basket on the bookshelf shifted in its sleep, paws twitching, dreaming. Outside, the rain kept on. The woman returned with his tea on a small wooden tray. A round brown teapot, a small brown cup, a saucer with a single biscuit on it. She set them down without fuss and went away again. The teapot was warm to the touch. The smell that rose from its spout was the soft, dark, slightly woody smell of cinnamon brewed gently in good water. He poured the cup. He warmed his hands around it. He brought it to his face and breathed in for a long moment before drinking. The first sip was quiet and clean. The cinnamon settled across his tongue and faded slowly into something rounder and warmer. He set the cup down and let the warmth from it travel up through his fingers and into the rest of him. He had not known how cold he had been until the warmth began to undo it. A movement at his elbow. The small black cat from the counter had crossed the room in the noiseless way that cats cross rooms, and was now sitting on the floor beside his chair, looking up at him with an unhurried, evaluative gaze. Not asking, not begging, just present. Theo lowered one hand to his knee, palm down, fingers loose. The cat regarded the hand for a long moment, then stood, padded forward, and rubbed the side of its small dark face against his fingers in one slow, considered pass. Then it sat again, exactly where it had been before, and resumed its inspection of him. The cat was small but full-grown, with the lean, tidy build of an animal that had decided long ago which corners of the world were worth knowing, and had narrowed its life to those. Its eyes were a pale yellow-green, very calm, very awake in the way of cats who have spent a great deal of their lives quietly observing rooms full of people who never quite noticed them. There was a very faint white patch on its chest, no larger than a thumbprint, that he might not have seen at all if the firelight had not caught it briefly when the cat had turned its head. He almost laughed. Not quite. The room was too quiet for laughter. He smiled instead, softly, into his cup, and lifted it for another sip. The black cat watched him drink. After a while, it stood and walked, with the same unhurried calm, toward the fire. It settled itself on the small woven rug in front of the hearth, and tucked its paws under its chest, and closed its eyes, and the firelight made the edges of its black fur a deep, soft red. The bread and soup arrived a little later. The bowl was wide and shallow, the soup a deep gold, with a small swirl of cream across the top and a sprinkling of green herbs. The bread was thick cut and pale brown and warm to the touch. The butter on the side was soft already from being left near the warmth of the kitchen. He ate slowly. The soup was the kind of soup that did not need to be analyzed. Onion, perhaps. Potato, something lightly herbal underneath, a small note of pepper at the very back of the swallow. The bread tore softly under his fingers and soaked the soup eagerly. He watched the steam rise from the bowl in pale curls and disappear into the warm air above the table. It was the first thing he had eaten slowly in some time. He did not eat slowly as a rule. Most meals lately had been taken at his desk, the bowl warmed in the small kitchen down the corridor and carried back to the keyboard. The spoon worked between glances at a screen. He had not noticed himself doing it that way. He noticed now only by way of the contrast. The contrast was the soup in front of him, warm and patient, and the rain outside, and the small bell above the door, and the cat on the rug by the fire. The rain kept falling. The old man at the corner table folded his newspaper and refolded it and laid it down. The young woman at the long table closed her notebook and set her pencil on top of it and stretched her arms slowly above her head. The orange cat on the window seat rolled onto its back and stretched out 4 long pale paws toward the ceiling, and held the stretch for a long, luxurious moment before tucking itself back into the curl of its sleep. The woman with the oatmeal apron moved softly between the tables, refilling cups, exchanging small, quiet words. She stopped at Theo's table once. "The bread is from the bakery up the road," she said. "The soup is whatever I happened to make this morning." He thanked her. She nodded and moved on. There was no need for more than that. He finished the soup. He buttered the last piece of bread and ate it slowly, watching the rain. When the bowl was empty, he set the spoon down on the rim and pushed the bowl gently toward the center of the table and turned again to his tea, which was still warm in the pot. He poured a second cup. The 4th cat made itself known at last. It came out from under the table in the corner, a long, lean, gray and white creature with one small notch out of the tip of one ear, and walked the length of the café slowly, pausing once to sniff at the leg of an empty chair, pausing again to look up at the kettle on the counter, as if considering its position in the room. It crossed the floor to the window seat and leapt up onto the cushion beside the orange cat without disturbing it, turned twice in a slow, tight circle, and lay down. The orange cat opened one eye, considered the new arrival, and went back to sleep. The 2 of them lay back to back in the warm window light, breathing in the slow, synchronized rhythm of cats who had been sleeping near each other for a long time. Theo watched them. Something in his chest unloosened, some small tightness he had not noticed himself carrying. The small gray and white cat tucked its nose against the back of the orange cat's neck. The orange cat sighed and pressed back slightly against the warmth. He sat for a long while. The rain continued. The fire continued. The kettle on the counter continued its small, soft breathing. A pale square of gray afternoon light moved slowly across the wooden floor as the hours passed, and where it touched the small black cat on the rug, the cat shifted minutely so as to follow it without quite waking up. He watched the cats with the slow attention one gives to anything that has nowhere to be. The orange one on the window seat had a small white star on its chest, only visible when it stretched. The gray and white one tucked beside it had a single dark spot on its pale chin. The gray tabby on top of the bookshelf snored, very softly, in a small steady rasp that was not unpleasant. The black one by the fire turned over slowly, exposing its pale belly to the warmth, then thought better of it and turned back. Each of them seemed to live in a different small kingdom of softness, and yet all of them shared the same room, and the room held them all easily. He thought, briefly, about the train, the next service, the connection, the friend's spare room at the other end of the journey. He thought about all of these things the way one thinks about them from inside a warm room watching a steady rain, which is to say with a great deal of softness and very little urgency. There would be other trains, There always were. He poured a third cup of tea. The young woman at the long table got up at some point and brought her empty cup to the counter and exchanged a quiet word with the woman in the apron and put on her own coat and stepped out into the rain with a small wave to no one in particular, and the door closed softly behind her. The bell gave its small brassy mention. The room settled again into its softer, quieter version of itself. The old man stayed where he was, the newspaper now open on a different page. He had not turned a page in a long time. Theo suspected he was not really reading. The woman with the oatmeal apron came around again, saw his cup was empty, and brought a fresh small jug of hot water for the pot. She did not ask. She only set it down with a small, soft smile and went away again. He thanked her quietly. The cinnamon was still strong enough that the second pot would be a slightly paler version of the first, which was exactly what he wanted. He poured the water in slowly. The teapot accepted it with a small, grateful sigh of steam. He swirled the pot once gently and set it back on its small wooden trivet, and watched the steam rise from the spout in a soft, pale curl that wandered up into the warm air above the table and disappeared. He liked the way steam looked in lamplight. He had never noticed himself liking this before. He noticed it now. The black cat on the rug rolled slowly onto its back and stretched, paws splaying open in the warmth of the fire, and showed for a moment a soft white patch on its belly that he had not noticed before. Then it rolled back onto its side and tucked its paws away again and was once more entirely composed. The fire breathed. The rain went on. He thought, after a while, about the way the room felt. It was the feeling of a place that did not require anything of him. He could stay or leave. He could read or not read. He could speak or not speak. The cats were not waiting for him to interact with them. The woman was not hovering for his next order. The other patrons were not curious about his presence. The room held him with the same easy, patient attention it held the orange cat, the gray tabby in its bookshelf basket, the old man in the corner, the small fire in the hearth, none of them more important than the others, none of them less. It was, he decided slowly, a kind of grace. He had not known how rare it was to be in a room that did not want anything from you. Most rooms wanted something, to be seen, to be admired, to be moved through quickly, to be ordered from, to be talked in. This room only wanted to keep being itself, and to let everything in it keep being itself too. He thought of all the rooms he had passed through in the last weeks. The office with its bright cold lights, the platform under the iron awning, the carriage of the train with its faint smell of disinfectant and old upholstery, the street outside the station. None of those rooms had been unkind. None of them had been bad. They had simply been busy with something other than him. This room was not busy with anything. This room only was. He could feel his shoulders dropping the longer he sat with that thought. He let them drop. The black cat on the rug sighed. The fire cracked softly. The rain drew a slow, soft line down the outside of the window. Outside, somewhere far up the lane, a church bell began to ring the hour. 5 long, slow notes, deep and round, drifting through the rain. The cats did not stir. The old man did not look up. Theo counted them out under his breath without meaning to, the small private counting one does when church bells ring nearby. 5. He had not noticed the afternoon turning. When he had stepped off the train, it had been just past 3. The light had been the soft, pale gray of mid-afternoon under rain. Now the light was lower, warmer, the color of late tea, the kind of light that meant the day had quietly given itself away to evening without asking anyone's permission. He did not mind. There was nothing he had needed to do with the lost hours. They had gone into the room, and the room was the better for them. The light in the cafe had gone a deeper amber. The lamps on the walls glowed a little brighter against it. The fire seemed to have gathered itself a little closer in the hearth. The rain was still steady, but had softened to a finer drift, almost a mist now, the kind of rain that makes the cobbles outside shine like a long dark river under the streetlights, which had begun, one by one, to come on along the lane. Theo sat in the window seat and watched them come on. Each small streetlight, in its turn, threw a soft, pale circle onto the wet stones. The fig tree in the back garden moved very gently. A pigeon landed on the low wall outside the window, considered the rain with the patient resignation of pigeons, and tucked itself into the shelter of the eaves above. A lamplighter would once have walked this lane, he thought, in the older time of this village's memory. A figure with a long pole and a small ladder, going lamp to lamp. The street lamps came on by themselves now, of course, on a soft electric timer, but the rhythm was the same, the slow ceremony of light arriving in a small place at the close of a wet day. He watched them come on with a small private gladness for the rhythm itself, which had been kept in some form across all the years of this lane, even as the people and the lamps and the timers had changed. The gray tabby on top of the bookshelf opened its eyes for the first time since Theo had arrived, looked around the room with an unhurried, regal calm, decided that nothing required its attention, and closed its eyes again. A slow, contented rumbling began in its chest that Theo could only just hear from across the room. He smiled into his cup. The woman in the oatmeal apron came over once more, this time with a small saucer of something on it, and set it down quietly on the table beside his teapot. A small piece of soft yellow cake, dotted with something darker, honey and walnut, she said quietly. On the house. For staying a while. He looked up at her. She was already moving away. He was not sure he had time to thank her properly before she had returned to the counter. He ate the cake slowly. It was sweet without being too sweet, the honey deep and a touch dark, the walnuts soft and slightly toasted. It tasted of long, quiet afternoons. It tasted of being unhurried. He licked one small crumb from his thumb and laid the small fork gently back on the saucer. He thought, in the warm quiet that followed, of the small kindnesses of strangers, and how they were perhaps the most unsentimental kind of love there was. The neighbor who waters a plant, the shopkeeper who slips an extra apple into the bag, the stranger who holds a door open without looking up, the woman in the oatmeal apron who sets down a small piece of cake on the table of someone she does not know and walks away before thanks can be properly given. None of these were grand. None of these were noticed by anyone except the recipient, and yet they made up some quiet share of what made being alive bearable. He had not thought about this in a long while. He thought about it now, with the cake gone, and his hand resting on the warm wood of the table, and the rain drifting on outside. The black cat on the rug got up at last, stretched the long, lean stretch of cats in front of fires, and walked, with great unhurried dignity, back across the room toward Theo's table. It paused beside his chair, looked up at him. He let his hand fall again, fingers loose, palm down. The cat considered the hand. Then, in a movement so slow and deliberate it had the quality of a small ceremony, it leapt softly up into the empty chair on the other side of the table, turned twice in its tight circle, and settled into the cushion with a long, contented sigh. It tucked its paws beneath its chest. It closed its eyes. It began to purr, softly. The small, steady rhythm of its purring fitting somehow into the larger, softer rhythm of the rain on the window, and the breathing of the fire, and the slow shifting of the orange cat on the window seat. Theo watched it for a long time, the small, dark shape of it in the chair across from him, the rise and fall of its small ribs as it purred, the way the firelight caught the very edge of its fur and made it for a moment a soft, warm gold against the deep black of the rest of it. He poured another small cup of tea. He warmed his hands around it. He drank it slowly. There would be a train, eventually, but there was no need to think about that yet. The rain was still falling, the cat was still purring, the fire was still burning low and warm in the hearth. The light in the room had settled into the soft amber of an evening that had not quite begun and was in no hurry to begin. He let his shoulders soften further into the chair. The room held him. The cat across from him kept its small, steady rhythm. The orange cat on the window seat slept on, curled now around the warm body of the gray and white one. The gray tabby on the bookshelf gave a small, sleepy chirrup in its dream and was quiet again. The small fire breathed. Outside, a single figure with an umbrella walked slowly past the window, and the umbrella went on and was gone. The cobbles shone, the street lamps glowed. Somewhere far off a dog barked once and was answered by another, and then both were quiet. Theo set his cup down gently on the saucer. He let his hand rest on the wooden table. The grain of the wood was smooth under his palm, worn softer at this corner than at the others, where many other hands must have rested over many other afternoons just like this one. He thought about all of those hands briefly, and the thought was not lonely. It was the thought of being part of something quiet and ongoing. The cat across from him purred on. The fire breathed. The rain drew its soft line down the window. He closed his eyes for a moment. He did not sleep. He only let his eyes rest closed, listening to the room around him. The small, soft sounds of it, the kettle on the counter, the gentle clink of a saucer being set down somewhere, the page of a newspaper being turned, slowly, the small, dry settling of a log in the fire, the cat's purr, steady and round. When he opened his eyes again, the light had shifted further into evening. The lamps on the walls were brighter against the deeper gray of the window. The fire had been gently fed, perhaps in a moment he had not quite tracked, and was burning a touch higher now. The black cat across from him slept on, paws still tucked, the small purring softer now, almost a hum. The woman in the oatmeal apron passed his table and paused. She looked at him with the same easy quiet she had had since he arrived. She did not ask if he wanted anything more. She did not ask if he was leaving. She only smiled and laid one hand briefly on the back of his empty chair and moved on. He stayed. The rain was lighter now, but had not stopped. The cat across from him was deeply asleep. There was no particular reason to leave. He had time. He poured the last of the tea. Cooler now, but still warm enough. He drank it slowly. The fire breathed. The cat purred. The rain whispered. The lamp above his table threw a small, warm circle of light onto the wood beside his cup, and inside that circle of light the saucer with the last few crumbs of honey cake glowed softly, and beside the saucer his hand lay still and warm. He thought about how he would remember this. The pale yellow door, the small bell, the orange cat on the window seat, the smell of cinnamon and wood smoke, the black cat that had chosen the chair across from him, the feeling of the room. He would remember it for a long time, not as something that had happened to him, but as a kind of small, still place he could return to in his mind on the harder days. It was, he thought, a very small thing. A few hours in a cafe in a village he had not meant to stop in. A pot of cinnamon tea, a bowl of soup, a cat that had chosen his chair. And yet small things, when they arrived softly enough, sometimes turned out to be larger on the inside than they looked from outside. He had forgotten, for a while that this was true. The room had reminded him. The bell above the door rang softly once. A new figure entered, shaking rain off a hat, settling at a far table with a small, contented sigh. The room absorbed them the way it had absorbed Theo. The black cat across from him did not stir. The fire did not stir. The rain went on. Time was passing in a way Theo could not quite measure. It was not slow exactly. It was just unmeasured. The kind of time that felt like the time of childhood afternoons in summer, where the hours stretched out without edges and the day was simply the day. He let his eyes drift to the window. The cobbles outside were a deep, wet shine. The street lamps glowed warmer in the deepening dusk. A small white moth fluttered briefly against the glass and was gone. The black cat sighed in its sleep. The orange cat on the window seat shifted, pressed closer to the gray and white one, and was still again. The fire breathed. The kettle hissed faintly. The rain drew its soft, long line down the window. His hand on the table was warm. His shoulders were soft. His cup was empty, but he did not yet need to refill it. He sat. The room sat with him. The cat across from him kept its small, steady rhythm. The fire breathed low. The lamp glowed soft. Outside, the rain became lighter still, almost not rain anymore, a fine, soft drift of damp evening air. A single church bell rang the half hour, deep and round, and faded. He listened. The black cat slept on. Somewhere in the back room, the woman in the apron was humming softly to herself, a small, wordless tune that went up and then down and then up again, and was not really a song so much as the sound of someone occupied with something small and pleasant. The humming drifted out into the front room and settled into the warm air with the smell of cinnamon and the breathing of the fire. Theo let his head rest back against the cushion of the chair. His eyes were heavy now in a soft, pleasant way. The cat across from him was a small, dark, warm shape in the chair. The room was a soft amber circle of light around him. The rain outside was a soft gray curtain beyond the window. He thought gently that he could happily fall asleep right here. No one would mind. The cat would not mind. The room was made for it. The fire breathed. The cat purred. The rain whispered. The lamp glowed. He let his eyes close again. Just for a moment, the small sounds of the room continued. The kettle, the page, the saucer, the hum from the back room, the breath of the fire, the whisper of the rain. The small, steady rhythm of the cat's purring across from him, slow and round and perfectly even. His shoulders softened further. His hand on the table grew loose. The warm air of the café settled around him like a soft blanket laid gently across a sleeping child. The black cat across the table sighed and settled deeper into the cushion. Its small ribs rose and fell. Its small paws were tucked. Its eyes were closed. The orange cat on the window seat slept. The gray and white cat slept. The gray tabby on top of the bookshelf slept. The fire glowed low and steady. The lamp threw its small circle of warm light. Theo's breath grew slow, slow, slow. The rain outside had almost stopped. The cobbles shone wet. A street lamp glowed gold. Somewhere in the back of the kitchen, the woman hummed her small wordless tune. The fire breathed. The cat purred. The small bell above the door was still. The room held everything in it gently. Theo's head was soft against the cushion. His cup sat empty beside the saucer. The cat across from him slept on. The lamp on the wall above his table glowed warm. The small circle of its light on the wooden table was the color of honey. The fire in the hearth had settled to soft red embers, the kind that put out a steady warmth without much sound. The rain on the window was barely more than a whisper now, a soft shimmer of water down the glass that caught the streetlight in small bright threads. The fire, the cat, the rain. He breathed in, out. The lamp glowed. The fire breathed. The cat purred. Outside, the evening settled. Inside, the room settled with it. The cat across from him kept its small, steady purr, soft, round, slow. The lamp glowed warm above the table. The fire breathed low in the hearth. The rain had eased to a soft hush against the window. The cat slept on. Theo's hand on the wooden table grew still. His shoulders were soft. His breath was slow. Theo slept.